Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this session of the Discover Creation podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of Christians versus creation and how Christians contradict their own beliefs about creation. Without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so I don't want to linger too long on each of the topics that I want to talk about today, but this topic specifically has been addressed in my hobby and in my social media pages just because I am a spirit filled Christian who also believes that there was dinosaurs and that things were alive before we can comprehend. It has come up in the comment section on a couple different things, and I just wanted to address those sections. So, a couple of the topics are that being a Christian, you can't believe in dinosaurs, which I think is ridiculous because we do have physical proof, right? We have bones, and if you go out, you can find prehistoric evidence of things that existed a long time ago. Well, that topic is kind of touchy, apparently, in the realm of Christianity. There's a lot of Christians out there, and I'm sure some of you guys are going to disagree with this podcast. There are some Christians out there who think that dinosaurs have never existed and that what we find are actually just rocks in unique shapes. And I think that's crazy. Other people also think that's crazy, and you may think that's crazy, but there have been people that truly believe that. They think that because dinosaur is not mentioned in the Bible, because these giant reptiles were not mentioned in any ancient text, that they did not exist. And that is one of the topics I want to talk about today. Another topic is that we cannot believe as Christians, according to social media, we cannot believe as Christians that dinosaurs existed before humans because that kind of contradicts itself, apparently. And a lot of people believe that that doesn't make sense in the Christian realm and they take that as a negative. Now, the main thing that I wanted to address today is not the fact that the secular world is confused on their own. I'm trying to place this lightly, but it has been the Christian community that has twisted the mindsets of these people. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's quite a few Christians that I have come across as a Christian myself who believe in specific rules about creation. And they say the Bible says that creation happened in 6 days, and that is final, and it has to be 6 days. Well, there is an issue with that. Well, you see, in the Bible, it also says that a day in heaven is 1,000 years on earth, and a year on earth is 1,000 years in heaven. Essentially, God was telling us that his timeline is not our timeline, and we cannot comprehend his timeline. And essentially, if it's one day in heaven, which is what would have been referred to in the story of creation, one day, that means that it was 1,000 years on earth. But then if you do the math, that's 365,000 days on earth, which would in return be like 3.65 million years in heaven. And that just continues spiraling bigger and bigger and bigger. The concept of uh, 1,000 years on earth is a day in heaven, and 1,000 years in heaven is a day on earth. That number continuously builds on itself, and you cannot comprehend it. So to say that God restricted himself to an actual human 6 days during the time of creation is kind of frivolous in our thinking. And in my mind, it actually kind of restricts the power of God and what he can do. I feel like he gave us those 6 days just as a time reference to allow our human minds to sort of comprehend creation. Now, that being said, we don't know how creation actually came about in the sense of animals. God doesn't say that every single species that he created stayed around the entire time in the garden. All he says is that he created. He doesn't tell us that which specific species he made, which ones died off, which ones he allowed to stay alive. That process was him having fun and him creating. Now, there is also the concept, and the Bible mentions it. The Bible talks about the fact that before creation, the earth was void and the earth was covered in darkness and it was ruled by evil. And so God created us in a way to get rid of that. Now, I know there's a deeper topic on that, but in my mind, that means that we don't know what was on the earth. It could have been anything. It could have been the dinosaurs. It could have been some other form of creation. And we are just living in the after effects of that original thing that God destroyed. Now, I'm not saying that that's what actually happened. I'm just saying that that is a theory. But my whole concept behind this podcast is to get you guys to open your mind as Christians and stop contradicting yourself in your own beliefs. Because to say that we know exactly how creation happened is kind of false and it's a lie because we don't. We don't know what animals came before humans. We don't know how many animals came after humans. We don't know when dinosaurs roamed the earth. We don't know if humans and dinosaurs ever roamed the earth together. And there was a episode of Kirk Cameron a while back where he brings on a creation specialist, and he mentioned the topic of we have to stop calling them dinosaurs because in the Bible and in prehistoric text, they did not have the term dinosaurs. That is a modern word. And so to call them dinosaurs and to look for that word in prehistoric text wouldn't necessarily make sense because they wouldn't have used that. Now, we also need to touch on the topic of us contradicting ourselves in the creation aspect of how animals actually came to be. Now, no, I'm not saying I believe in evolution, and I absolutely do not believe in evolution. Obviously, Discover Creation is the name of this podcast and the name of this channel. So I believe that God created. But we also have a tendency as Christians to contradict our own beliefs about creation and how it happened. Now, we all know the story of the flood, Noah and the ark, and how he had two of every kind of animal on the ark. Now, there's a sermon that I watched recently by evangelist Daniel Kalinda, and he mentions the fact that we need to stop reading too deeply into those words. God strictly says Noah took two of every kind. He didn't say he took two of every breed, two of every subbreed, two of every subspecies, two of every genetic mutation. He said he took two of every kind, meaning he had two dogs, two cats, two elephants, two giraffes, so on and so forth. Now there is the part where they mention how they took seven of every other different types of animals just for like sacrificing and for food consumption and that. But strictly the numbers of two by two, he didn't take a golden retriever and a pug. He took wolves. And that has been proven in scientific data. Now, a lot of Christians refuse to believe that. They say, well, scientists say that all dogs came from wolves, but I don't believe that because that proves evolution. It does not. That proves adaptation. And that comes in the human race as well. You'll notice people that live in incredibly cold climates sometimes are hairier than people that live in warmer climates. It just is a genetic mutation that happens over time from living in those areas. And there's a topic that I like to talk about. The squirrels, I believe they're from the Grand Canyon. I might be getting that location wrong, but they are the exact same squirrel, but their colors are different depending on the side of the canyon that they are on because they need to blend into different locations. And that is adaptation and natural selection. The ones who were the wrong color on the different sides were killed off, and the ones who were the right color survived. And that just happens throughout history. And eventually, you can create several different breeds and several different subspecies of the exact same animal. Now, on that topic, I know there's going to be some of you that say, well, that's not true because all dogs were created domesticated, and God says in the Bible that He created domestic animals for us to raise. Yes, but how does an animal become domestic? Domestic is not born out of the womb of the animal, born out of the placenta, and it comes to be licking your hand and says, teach me tricks. That is not what domesticated is. A domesticated animal is an animal that can be trained. And we need to stop confusing those two aspects because all dogs in the wild are vicious, mean animals, meaning they all go back to their wolf roots. They are a domesticated animal, and wolves you can domesticate as well, but they were created in a way that in the wild they can still defend themselves and they can still survive. Now, what Daniel Kalinda said about the ark having two of every kind, he also touched on the fact that there were some scientists that did the math. And if that was the exact case, that there could be as little as 1,500 species on the ark to produce all of the different species that we have today and continue producing new species. That being said, we really need to, as the Christian community, open our mindset. And I know this seems like I'm really dogging on what Christians believe, but I myself don't see it that way. I see it as just open your minds and see new ways. No, I'm not saying the Bible is wrong. I'm not saying that in any way, so don't take that from this podcast. But what I'm saying is God's timeline is not ours. God's creation was not ours. So we cannot try to say, as the Christian community, we know how creation happened. We don't. We can't say we know how the timeline happened because we truly don't. We can't say we know which animals existed at which times, how the ark actually held all the animals. We don't know any of that. So quit trying to say that you do. Now, the reason I touch on that is because we have come to the conclusion of making a secular world that hates the concept of creation. If you ask anybody who has taken biology class in high school about creation, they say it doesn't make sense. And you say why, and they'll start giving you all these contradicting statements that Christians make about their own rules. And I recently had somebody in the comment section say that as a Christian, you cannot believe in dinosaurs because that contradicts our belief. Where in the Bible does that contradict? Because last time I checked, the Bible doesn't mention any of the species. So to say that I believe in dinosaurs and that they existed is no different than saying that I believe in in lions and in dogs and in dolphins, because none of those species are actually referenced in the Bible. Well, except for the lion. I'm tired of people being turned away from the God concept just because we ourselves cannot prove what we're saying. God created and God is real, and we should be able to say that with confidence, and we should be able to back up our own statements. But when it comes to creation, we really can't say that we know how it happened. So when a secular person comes up to us and says, "Hey, how did this actually play out? Where does this happen in history?" We need to step back and say, "Well, we don't know." We need to be honest and say, "That's not up to us. That's not up to our knowledge. That's God's knowledge, and only He knows that. Only God knows when dinosaurs existed." As much as we want to try to believe it, that's all we can say. We can't prove when dinosaurs existed. Now, that being said, we also need to stop limiting the timeline of creation. I had somebody comment and say, sorry, it wasn't on one of my posts, but it was a post, and they had a picture of the Sphinx from Egypt. And they said this disproves the Bible because the Sphinx are 7,000 years old and the Bible is 6,500 years old. And that instantly threw up a red flag for me because where have we come up with this solution that the Bible is only 6,500 years old? We can't prove that. Yeah, you can try to piece together a timeline, but why are we trying to piece together something that God hasn't told us to do? God did not tell us to develop a timeline for the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible does God tell us to do that. He tells us to trust the Bible, follow its rules, follow its words, follow his word, and go and proclaim the gospel. So I just think it's frivolous to try to prove a timeline of creation. And we don't know how long creation actually took in the aspect of God. Now there's a movie out. It's an older movie, but it's called The Genesis Code. And in this movie, it's about 3 hours, and I will be honest, it's kind of slow. But the concept they make in the movie is that one day in the beginning of creation could have possibly been 13 million years. We don't know, but according to the math that they figured out, that is very plausible. And so, that being said, when they say this dinosaur is 60 million years old, it is highly possible that that is true. And who are we to say that it's not? Because we don't want to believe it. When you come in and you say, there's no way that dinosaur bone is 60 million years old, okay, well, can you show me proof? Can you show me evidence? Because the carbon dating that they have on this animal shows that that is true. And the moment that we start denying scientific facts, we also start denying our own belief. Because how are we to say that we deny the science behind carbon dating and the science that they have physical proof for? But when somebody is healed in one of our services, we say to go to those same scientists and prove your healing. We can't. We can't say that science is true and then also come across and say science is lying. That's not something that we can state as Christians. We have to believe the truth. And I'm not speaking about the news stations. Don't trust the news stations. I'm talking about the absolute truth that God created and we don't know how. To say that we know how is limiting God's creation. Well, I know that was sort of a ramble and a rant, but I just really wanted to touch on that. And I know this podcast wasn't terribly long, but it's been frustrating me the fact that it's so hard to get people to believe in creation simply because of our own doing, our own unbelief of how creation could have possibly happened, and our own determination to prove that creation happened in a way that we have no proof. Well, that being said, I hope that didn't turn off too many of you to this podcast because I feel like it needed said. But thanks for tuning in, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you guys on the next podcast.